The casting director looked at me like she already knew my soul. "Have we met before?" she asked. And my hands went cold. 6 months later. I was drowning in a secret I couldn't drown. My mother called it a phase. I called it my whole life. Then the photos leaked. And everyone I loved turned away at once. Elena took my hand backstage and said, "Run with me tonight." I said yes. I had no idea what I was about to lose. My name is Maya Reyes, 26 years old, raised in Savannah, Georgia. In a house where silence was a language everyone spoke fluently and well. I moved to Los Angeles chasing a dream I barely admitted to myself, carrying a duffel bag, $300, and a secret I'd buried since high school. The casting call was for an indie film called Harbor Lights, a small production with a director named Elena Cruz, whose reputation for honesty on set preceded her. I waited in a hallway lined with folding chairs, rehearsing lines I'd memorized so many times they'd stopped sounding like words and started sounding like breathing. When they called my name, I walked into a room lit by a single window, and a woman with dark curls looked up from her script and stared. "Have we met before?" Elena asked, tilting her head, and something in her voice made the question feel less like small talk and more like a memory surfacing. I told her no. We hadn't. Though something about her face tugged at a corner of my mind, I couldn't quite reach her name. I read the scene, a monologue about grief and longing, and when I finished, the room was quiet in a way that felt like held breath. "That was real," Elena said simply, closing her folder. "Most people perform sadness. You just let it sit there. That's rare." I got the callback that evening, then the part 3 days later. A supporting role that felt bigger than anything I'd been given before. On the first table read, Elena sat across from me, correcting nobody's lines but mine. Gentle notes delivered like she cared whether I understood, not just obeyed. Afterward, she caught up with me in the parking lot and asked if I wanted coffee. Said it like it meant nothing, though her eyes said otherwise. We talked for 3 hours in a diner booth about nothing important. Movies we loved, cities we'd left behind, and somehow it felt like everything important. She walked me to my car afterward, and when she said goodnight, I noticed I'd been holding my breath the entire drive over without knowing why. I told myself it was just a friendship forming, the kind actors and directors sometimes build. Nothing more. Nothing I needed to examine too closely. Rehearsals became the part of my week I looked forward to most. More than I wanted to admit, even inside the privacy of my own head. Elena had a habit of remembering small things I'd mentioned once. My favorite song. The name of my childhood dog. Details I hadn't realized had landed anywhere. One night after a late shoot, she drove me home because my car was in the shop, and the silence in the car felt comfortable instead of empty. "You disappear sometimes," she said at a red light, not looking at me. "Even when you're standing right there. I notice." I didn't know how to answer her, because she was right, and because nobody had ever noticed that particular kind of disappearing before. I started noticing things about her too. The way she chewed the end of her pen, the way she hummed when she thought no one heard. We began texting outside of work. First about scenes and schedules, then about nothing related to the film at all. Just our days. Our thoughts. Ourselves. I told my best friend Priya about the texting, and she raised an eyebrow and said, "That's not how you talk about your boss, Maya." I laughed it off. But that night I reread our messages and realized how carefully I'd chosen every word. How much I wanted to sound clever. At a wrap party for the first act of filming, Elena found me on the balcony, away from the noise, and we stood there without speaking for a while. "I don't usually get close to people on set," she said quietly. "It complicates things. But I haven't been able to help it with you." My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it over the music drifting out from the open door behind us. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. And for a moment I thought she might close the distance between us right there on that balcony. Instead she smiled, said goodnight, and left me standing there wondering if I had imagined the whole moment out of loneliness and wishful thinking. The next day on set, she was professional again, distant even, and I spent the whole shoot wondering if I'd ruined something by wanting too much. That evening she texted just one line. "I'm sorry about last night. I got scared. Can we talk?" I said yes before I even finished reading it. We met at a park near my apartment, and she told me about her last relationship, a woman who left because Elena wouldn't come out publicly. "I've spent years protecting my career instead of my heart," she admitted, sitting on a bench, refusing to look at me while she said it. I told her about my own history, the girl I'd loved quietly in high school, the way I'd learned to fold myself smaller to survive Savannah. We didn't kiss that night, but something shifted. An understanding that we were both circling the same fear from opposite directions of the same life. For weeks after that, we existed in a careful in-between, closer than friends. Not yet anything with a name, both too afraid to say it first. She started leaving small things on set for me, a coffee exactly how I liked it, a note tucked into my script that just said breathe. I found myself rearranging my schedule to catch a few extra minutes with her, telling myself it was about the work, knowing it wasn't. One rainy afternoon, filming got canceled, and we ended up at her apartment, wrapped in blankets, watching an old film neither of us was really watching. "I keep waiting for you to tell me I'm wrong about this," she said, gesturing between us. "But you never do." "Maybe because you're not wrong," I said, and the words felt like stepping off a ledge I'd been standing on for years. She reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and I finally let myself lean into the moment instead of away from it. We didn't define anything that night, but when she walked me to the door, she held my hand a beat longer than a friend would. The next morning I woke up smiling before I even remembered why, and it took me a moment to place the lightness in my chest. I called my mother that week, not to tell her anything, just to hear her voice, and found myself flinching at how easily she asked about any boys. I said no boys. Changed the subject fast, hating how practiced the deflection had become, how automatic. Like a muscle memory I couldn't unlearn. Elena and I started spending our Sundays together, cooking badly in her small kitchen, laughing at our mutual disaster with a recipe neither of us could follow. "I want to take you somewhere that isn't a set or my apartment," she said one evening. "I want an actual first date. If you'll let me." I said yes so fast it surprised us both, and she laughed. The real kind. The kind that reached all the way to her eyes. Our first real date was at a small restaurant in Silver Lake. Candles and quiet music. And for the first time in years I felt entirely present. "I haven't done this in a long time," she confessed over dessert. "Let myself want something instead of managing it from a safe distance." I told her I hadn't done it at all. Not really. Not with someone who made me feel like myself instead of a performance of myself. She walked me home afterward, and outside my building, under a flickering streetlight, she finally kissed me, soft and certain and long overdue. I floated through the next few days, replaying that kiss like a scene I'd been asked to perform 100 times and still couldn't get right. We agreed to keep things private for now, not because we were ashamed, but because both our careers sat on foundations we weren't ready to test. Priya was the first person I told, and she hugged me so hard I nearly toppled over, saying she'd known before I did. "You've been different since Harbor Lights started," she said. Lighter. I just didn't know if it was the job or the director. I laughed and admitted it was absolutely the director, and saying it out loud made the whole thing feel more real than it had in weeks. Elena introduced me to a few close friends. Careful. Curated. People she trusted completely, and I felt honored to be let that far inside. One friend, a producer named Grace, pulled me aside and said, "Take care of her. She doesn't let people in easily. You matter to her." Promised I would. Meaning it fully. Not yet understanding how hard that promise would become to keep in the months ahead. We fell into an easy rhythm. Stolen mornings before call time. Late dinners after wrap. A private language of glances only we understood on set. I started imagining a future for the first time in years. Small things. An apartment together someday. A life that didn't require constant translation or hiding. Filming wrapped on the first act of the movie. And the cast gathered to celebrate. Elena and I careful to keep a professional distance in public. Under the table. Though, her hand found mine. And I thought, foolishly, that the hardest part of loving her might already be behind us. My mother called to say she was flying out for my birthday. And something about her voice told me this wasn't a simple visit. I hadn't told her about Elena. Hadn't told her much of anything real in years. And the thought of her landing in Los Angeles made my chest tighten. Elena offered to make herself scarce during the visit. And I hated how relieved I felt at the suggestion. Hated what that relief said about me. My mother arrived with opinions about my apartment, my job, and eventually, over dinner, about a photo she'd seen on my phone by accident. "Who is this woman you keep texting?" she asked, holding my phone like evidence. "You light up different when her name pops up." I froze, caught between two versions of myself. The daughter she raised and the woman I'd become 3,000 miles from home. "She's my director," I said, which was true. And also the smallest, most cowardly version of the truth I could offer her. My mother studied my face for a long moment, then set the phone down without another word. And something cold settled between us for the rest of the visit. After she left, I called Elena crying. Not because anything had been said outright, but because everything unsaid had been so loud. "You don't owe her the truth before you're ready," Elena said gently, though I could hear the old ache in her own voice too. Meanwhile, tension started building on set with a fellow actress, Brooke Sinclair, who seemed to watch Elena and me with narrowed, calculating eyes. Brooke had auditioned for my role originally, lost it, and had never quite hidden her resentment underneath a very thin layer of professional politeness. "You two seem close," she said one day, too casually. Watching for a reaction she clearly expected me to give away. I brushed it off. But Elena warned me to be more careful on set, reminding me how quickly rumors could travel through a small production. The studio backing the film was conservative, risk-averse, worried about controversy overshadowing the story, a fact Elena had shielded me from until now. "If this got out before the film releases," she said, "it could tank the whole project. Not just for me. For everyone attached." I understood the stakes intellectually, but emotionally it felt like being asked to shrink myself again. Exactly the thing I'd left Savannah to stop doing. We had our first real fight over it. Both of us exhausted. Both of us scared. Both of us saying things we didn't fully mean. "I'm tired of being a secret," I told her. "I've been someone's secret my whole life. I thought this would be different." "It's not about hiding you," she said, voice breaking. "It's about protecting what we're building until it's strong enough to survive the world seeing it." I left her apartment that night angrier than I'd been in months, not entirely sure if I was angry at her or at everything before her. My father called the next day, something he rarely did, and told me my mother had been asking questions around the family since her visit. "She's not trying to hurt you," he said carefully. "She's trying to understand something she doesn't have the words for yet." I appreciated the honesty but couldn't shake the fear that understanding, when it came, might come with conditions I wasn't willing to accept. Elena and I made up a few days later. But something between us felt more fragile now, like a fault line we both knew existed. At the same time, Brooke started showing up wherever Elena and I happened to be. Coffee shops. A bookstore. Always with a convenient excuse. I began to suspect she was following us, though I told myself I was being paranoid, that nobody would go to that kind of trouble. One evening, Elena and I met for dinner at a quiet restaurant we thought was safe, tucked away from the industry crowd we usually avoided. Halfway through the meal, I noticed Brooke at a corner table, phone angled toward us in a way that made my stomach drop. I pointed her out to Elena, who went very still, then quietly asked for the check, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her wallet. We left separately, a habit we developed for moments like this, but the damage, I would later learn, had already been done that night. A week passed with no incident, and I let myself believe we'd been overreacting, that Brooke had simply been having dinner, nothing more. Then Priya called me, voice tight, and told me to check my email, that something was circulating online I needed to see immediately. There were photos, grainy but unmistakable, Elena and I at that restaurant, our hands close together on the table, posted to an entertainment gossip account. The caption speculated, cruelly and confidently, about an affair between the director and a supporting actress, using both our full names without hesitation. My phone exploded with messages within the hour, some curious, some cruel, all of them stripping something private into a public spectacle overnight. I called Elena, and she didn't pick up for almost an hour, the longest hour of silence I'd experienced since moving to Los Angeles. When she finally called back, her voice was flat, exhausted. The studio's already talking about pulling their financing. This is bad. Maya. I asked if she was more worried about the film or about me, and the pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. I need space to figure out how to handle this, she said. And I heard the door closing on us before she said another word. My mother saw the photos too, somehow, and called me sobbing. Not with anger exactly, but with a grief I hadn't expected and didn't know how to hold. Is it true? She asked. Are you gay? Maya. I sat on my bathroom floor and finally said the word out loud to her. Yes, I said. I am. I've been for a long time. I just didn't know how to tell you without losing you. She didn't respond right away, and the silence on the line felt like it stretched across every mile between Savannah and Los Angeles at once. I need time, she finally said, and hung up, leaving me alone in an apartment that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. The studio called an emergency meeting, and I sat across a table from executives discussing my personal life like it was a line item to manage. Elena barely looked at me during the meeting, her jaw tight, her hands folded like she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. They floated the idea of recasting my role entirely, quietly, to make the distraction disappear before the film's release date approached. I walked out of that meeting numb, unsure if I still had a job, a relationship, or a family that would speak to me again. Elena found me in the parking garage afterward, and for a moment I thought she'd finally choose me, but she only said, I'm sorry. I need time too. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life, quieter even than the years I'd spent hiding in Savannah, because now the silence had a shape. I kept working, because I needed the money and because stopping felt like admitting defeat. But every day on set felt like walking through glass. Elena and I spoke only about scenes, blocking, call times. Our old warmth replaced by a professionalism so careful it felt like grief. Brooke, to my surprise, avoided me entirely now, and I later learned the studio had quietly warned her about leaking further information. I found out from Grace, the producer, that Brooke had been struggling financially, desperate for attention after losing several roles that year. It doesn't excuse what she did, Grace said, but I think she was scared too, in her own ugly way, of being forgotten. I didn't have room to forgive Brooke yet, not with my own life in pieces, but the explanation softened the sharpest edge of my anger. My mother called again after 2 weeks of silence, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it, asking if we could talk properly. We talked for 2 hours. About my childhood. About the girl I'd loved in secret at 17. About every year I'd spent performing a version of myself for her. I always knew, she admitted quietly. I think I've known since you were 15. I just didn't have the courage to ask. Then why did it take a scandal for you to say something? Asked, unable to keep the hurt out of my voice. Because I was scared of losing you the way my sister lost her daughter, she said. Fear made a coward out of me too. She told me about an aunt I'd never known well, estranged from the family decades ago after coming out. A story buried so deep I'd never heard it. I don't want to be the reason you disappear the way she did, my mother said. I want to learn. I want to try. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a door opening after years of a locked room, and I let myself walk through it slowly. Meanwhile, the film's future hung in uncertain limbo, the studio debating whether to shelve the project entirely to avoid further controversy. Elena fought for the film in meetings I wasn't invited to, and I heard secondhand that she'd threatened to walk if they recast me. I didn't know that yet, though, and in my isolation I assumed the worst, that she'd chosen the film over whatever we'd had. Priya finally sat me down and said, "You keep telling her story in your head without asking her what actually happened. Talk to her." I resisted for days. Too proud. Too hurt. Until an old crew member mentioned offhand that Elena looked worse than I did, barely sleeping. I found her at the empty soundstage one evening, sitting alone under a single work light, script pages scattered across her lap, untouched. "I heard you fought for my job," I said, and she looked up, startled, like she hadn't expected me to know or to come. "Of course I did," she said. "I just couldn't tell you while everything was falling apart. I didn't want to make promises I might break." "You already broke one," I said quietly. "You said you weren't hiding me. Then the first hard moment came, and you disappeared." She flinched like I'd hit her, and for a long moment neither of us said anything, the silence heavier than any argument could be. "You're right," she finally said. I panicked. I protected the film instead of protecting us. And I am so sorry. "Maya, I spent my whole life being someone's secret," I said. "I can't do that again. Not even for someone I love this much." The word love hung in the air between us, the first time either of us had said it, arriving in the middle of an accusation instead of a kiss. She stood up slowly, closing the distance between us. "I love you too. I've been too scared to say it, and that's on me." I wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly it frightened me, but I told her I needed to see it, not just hear it. "Show me," I said. "Don't just tell me you'll choose me. Choose me." Out loud, where people can see it. She promised she would find a way, though neither of us knew yet what that would look like, or what it might cost her career. A few days later, the studio called another meeting, this time to announce their decision about the film's fate before a scheduled press junket. They decided to keep the film, quietly, on the condition that both Elena and I stayed silent about our relationship until after release. Elena stood up in that meeting and said something none of us expected, not even me, sitting stunned beside her. "I won't sign anything asking either of us to hide who we love," she said. "If that costs the film its funding, I'll find funding elsewhere." The room went silent, executives exchanging glances, and I sat there watching the woman I loved choose me in front of people who held her career. The studio didn't pull funding that day, but they made it clear the decision came with risk, reputational and financial, that Elena now carried alone. Outside, in the hallway, she turned to me, breathless. "That's what showing you looks like. I don't know what happens next, but I'm not hiding anymore." I kissed her right there, in a hallway full of glass offices and passing assistants, not caring anymore who saw or what they assumed. Word spread fast after that, faster than the original photos had. But this time the narrative was ours to shape instead of stolen from us. Some industry friends distanced themselves quietly, uncomfortable with the visibility, and it stung more than I expected, even from people I barely knew. Others, unexpectedly, reached out with support, including actors and directors who've been hiding similar truths for years. Grateful someone had gone first. My mother flew out again, this time without warning, and showed up at my apartment holding a container of my favorite dish from home. "I want to meet her," she said simply, standing in my doorway. "I want to understand the person who makes my daughter this happy." I introduced her to Elena over an awkward, wonderful dinner. Watching two of the most important people in my life navigate careful, hopeful conversation. It wasn't seamless. My mother still stumbled over words, still asked questions that landed clumsily, but she stayed. And she tried. And that mattered enormously. The film's premiere was scheduled for 6 weeks later. And the studio, sensing an opportunity now rather than a liability, asked us to attend together. Elena asked if I wanted to walk the red carpet publicly as a couple, said she'd understand completely if I wasn't ready for that yet. I thought about every version of myself I'd folded away over the years, and told her I was more than ready, that I was done hiding. The night of the premiere arrived faster than either of us felt prepared for. My hands shaking as I zipped into a dress I'd chosen with Priya. Elena picked me up herself, refusing the studio car, saying she wanted this moment to belong to just the two of us before the world watched. "Last chance to back out," she joked weakly in the car, though her eyes betrayed how much this moment meant to her too. "I've been backing out of my own life for 26 years, I said. "I'm done. Let's go be seen." The red carpet was a blur of flashing lights and shouted questions, and halfway down it, Elena reached over and took my hand without hesitation. A wave of camera shutters exploded at once, and I felt my whole body tense. Then, strangely, release. Like something long held finally letting go. A reporter shouted a question about our relationship, and Elena stopped, turned toward the cameras, and answered without flinching or looking away. "This is Maya," she said. "She's not a rumor or a scandal. She's the person I love." I should have said that months ago. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheers, some awkward silence, a few sharp comments I chose not to read later online. Inside the theater, we sat together, her hand resting on my knee through the entire film, both of us watching a story that now felt half our own. Harbor Lights told a quiet story about grief and reconnection, and watching it now, I saw new layers in every scene we'd filmed together. After the credits rolled, the audience applauded, and Elena stood to speak briefly, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly running underneath it. "This film almost didn't survive," she said. "Neither did something else I care about deeply. I'm grateful both did." In the end, backstage after the screening, a young woman approached me, maybe 19, eyes bright with something I recognized instantly from my own reflection years ago. "Seeing you on that carpet," she said, voice trembling, "made me think maybe I don't have to keep hiding from my own family." I hugged her without thinking, and something in that small, unplanned moment felt more important than any review the film would ever receive. Brooke was there too. Unexpectedly, standing at the edge of the room, clearly unsure whether she was welcome after everything that had happened. She approached me hesitantly and apologized, her voice shaking, admitting she'd been jealous, scared, and cruel in ways she deeply regretted now. "I was drowning in my own fear of being irrelevant," she said, "and I tried to pull someone else down with me. I'm sorry, Maya." I didn't forgive her instantly. Some wounds take longer than a single conversation, but I accepted the apology as a real, imperfect, beginning. Later that night, my mother called. Having watched clips of the red carpet online, her voice thick with something between fear and fierce pride. "I saw you holding her hand," she said, "in front of everyone. I've never seen you stand that tall in your entire life. I finally feel like myself," I told her. And for the first time in years, I meant it completely, without hesitation or apology. The studio, watching the positive press response unfold, quietly shifted their stance, now promoting the film's authenticity as a selling point instead of a liability. Elena was offered 2 new projects within a month, both explicitly citing her courage at the premiere as part of why they wanted her. Funny, she said, reading the emails aloud to me in bed one morning, how the thing I was so afraid would end my career became the reason for it. We moved in together 3 months later, into a small house with a yellow door that Elena insisted matched my energy perfectly. My mother visited often after that. Awkward but earnest, learning slowly how to ask better questions, how to simply sit in our happiness without flinching. I called the young woman from the premiere occasionally, checking in, and learned she'd finally come out to her older sister, who'd hugged her instantly. Priya became close friends with Elena too, the 3 of us forming an unlikely, easy family around Sunday dinners and terrible homemade lasagna. Even Brooke, months later, sent me a message saying she'd started therapy, finally facing the fear she'd spent years running from instead of naming. I thought often about that first casting call, about Elena's strange, certain question, have we met before? And one night I finally asked her what she meant. She laughed, a little embarrassed, and admitted she'd seen me years earlier at a small queer youth conference in Atlanta, before either of us was ready to speak. I never forgot your face, she said. I didn't know why until you walked into that audition room, and everything clicked into place. I remembered that conference too. Suddenly, a shy girl across a crowded room I'd been too scared to approach, a memory I'd buried for a decade. You were the girl by the window, I whispered, stunned. I thought about you for months afterward and never knew your name. We sat with that discovery for a long time. 2 strangers who'd almost met a decade earlier, finally finding their way to each other anyway. Maybe some people are just meant to find each other twice, Elena said. Once too early, and once exactly when we're finally ready. I used to believe being myself would cost me everything I loved, my family, my career, my sense of belonging in the world. Instead, it gave me all of it back, truer and stronger. Standing beside a woman who'd waited a decade to say my name out loud. Fendi.